Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite new adult romance books. These are not going to fall into like any specific trope or anything. These are just going to be like my top 5 favorite ones that I've read recently because I felt like I wanted to include them all in a video, but there was no way to really do that if I divided them all up into tropes. So this is just literally going to be my personal favorites. So let's just get right into it. So the book that currently holds the #1 spot for me as my all-time favorite book also happens to fall into this new adult romance category, and that is The Simple Wild by Kay Tucker. I am obsessed with this book. If you've never heard of it, it's about a girl who basically she finds out that her dad is really sick and she hasn't seen him like since she was like 1 or something, when her and her mom left Alaska, and she gets a call saying he's really sick and like basically if she wants to come see him, now's the time to do so. And so she's kind of like, at first she's like, no, I'm not gonna go, like this is dumb, like we don't even know each other. And then she sort of thinks it over for a couple days and talks to her stepdad and finally decides she's gonna go. And she goes, and when she gets there she meets this pilot who works for her dad's like airport. Like her dad like owns the airport hangar, I guess, that they're in, and a bunch of planes and stuff. And so she gets there and she meets this pilot that works for her dad and is kind of like, I don't know if he's necessarily like a head pilot, but he's definitely like the sort of top person that seems to work there. Like he's the one that her dad goes to whenever he needs something, kind of thing. And he hates her like right off the bat because he thinks she's like this city girl who like, you know, will never last in Alaska. And he's constantly like poking fun at like what she's wearing or like, you know, things that she's doing that he thinks are like dumb because they don't do that in Alaska, or they do this in Alaska and she doesn't know. And he just like can't stand her because of that. And I think part of it is also that he's like annoyed that it took her dad basically like being on his deathbed to get her to come visit him. And so he's like kind of annoyed at her for that too. Like he just doesn't like her at all, and so they sort of start like bickering back and forth, and the banter in this book is so good. So good. Even like the little like pranks they play on each other are so funny too. Like I laughed so many times during this book. There's one part where they're at the hangar and there's a joke about him looking like a Yeti, and that is like one of my favorite lines in the whole book because it's just so funny in that like context. And I just really loved the whole evolution of this. I liked that in addition to the romance, I felt like I literally had been to this town in Alaska. Like that's not something that I find is very common with romance books. In fact, I've realized recently that I recycle the same like 3 or 4 houses in my head that any characters that I read live in. And this was just so different, and it was so like, this book isn't even that long, but it was so descriptive about like what the house looked like down to the wallpaper and like the paintings on the wall and stuff. Like I could literally imagine what this place looked like, and that's not something that I feel like is super common in the romance genre. And so I really like that as well. And I liked the side characters that are introduced as well. They are super cool, and they're like kept in the story throughout the series, which I really liked as well. And so this one is my current favorite. I highly recommend it, obviously. Next is a very recent read for me, which is Clipped Wings by Helena Hunting. This book is a little bit older. I think it was put out prior to 2014 because the second one I'm pretty sure came out in 2014. So it's a little bit older, but I recently read this one because I went through all of Helena Hunting's books, and this one particularly, I don't know, it just hit different. It's about a girl who basically something really tragic happens to her, and she decides she's gonna move to this town to go to this university and get her master's. And so she moves into this apartment above like a used bookstore kind of place, and the owner of the used bookstore offers her a job there, so she ends up working there just to sort of fill her time because she doesn't want to sit around thinking about the thing that happened to her. And so she's working in this like used bookstore, and this guy keeps coming in from across the street where there's a tattoo shop, and he is like coming in all the time, and then she finds out that he is the owner of the store's nephew, and so that's why he's like coming in all the time. But she can also see into the tattoo shop from her apartment window, So she's like really keeping an eye on this guy. His name's Hayden, which I really think is cute as well. And so she's just like kind of watching him for a while, and he's watching her, but they don't like know each other's watching each other. It's just like really cute. And then she decides she wants to get this like massive tattoo. And everyone in the shop is like, you can't just like dive in with this giant tattoo if you've never had a tattoo before. And he is really concerned about it, particularly because it's sort of dark, and he is like, I don't want to put this on you until I know like why I'm doing it, basically, kind of thing. And she's like, yeah, I'm not telling you, like whatever, like it's none of your business, kind of thing. And slowly I feel like they sort of start to like wear on each other, where he's like, okay, well, like maybe if I get like closer to her, she'll tell me this. And like he's suddenly like involved in like invested in finding out like more about her. And there's this thing that happens at the end, I'm not gonna say, but it's like, it does end on a cliffhanger sort of, so you're gonna want to have inked armor. I had the problem where I couldn't find inked armor anywhere when I finished Clipped Wings, so like if you're gonna read it, definitely find the second one. But I don't know, there was just something about this book that it was so different than a lot of the other books I've ever read. I mean, I've never read a book where the guy in it's a tattoo artist either, so maybe that was like part of it. But I just thought it was really interesting and really different, and yeah, like I said, there's a second book. I like that one as well, but the first one definitely holds a special place in my heart. Next is Wait For You by Jalen or Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the first book in a series of sort of college / new adult romances, and this one I really fell in love with. This was actually my #1 favorite book for a while until I read the last two that I mentioned. And this is about a girl who, very similar to the last one, something like sort of tragic happens in her life, and she decides she's going to move away from her town, basically to like the other side of the US, to get away from it all and go to this university. And she ends up on her first day, she literally runs into this guy in the hall, and he's like, wow, like, you know, girls are always throwing themselves at me, or like whatever, like he makes like a joke and whatever, and she's like so embarrassed. She ends up like leaving and running out of the class. And he ends up being like, okay, like what the heck was that? Like, this girl was just here and now she's running. And then he like sees her on the sidewalk afterwards, and he's like, hey, do you need a ride? And she's like, nope, like I want nothing to do with you, like you can't get far enough away from this dude. And he ends up, she finds out, like, this isn't like a spoiler or anything, it literally happens in like the first chapter, but she finds out that he lives like across the hall from her, and so he's just like constantly in her face. He keeps showing up at her apartment and like cooking her eggs every Sunday, like they have like this tradition, and she's like, I'm not going out with you, and he just keeps asking her like every day. He asks her, will you go out with me, like will you go out with me? And every day she says no, and he like doesn't like push it, like it's not like in a sort of like harassing kind of way. It's very much like they hang out all day and he just like casually tosses in the question, and she's like no, and he's like okay. And then obviously one day she finally says yes. But I just found this one was really, really cute, and again, like the tragic past thing kind of comes into play. I feel like that's like something that for whatever reason I'm really drawn to, is books where like someone moves far away because of some like tragedy that happens, and then their like significant other person, love interest, has to figure out sort of like what drove them out of that town. Like I really like that sort of dynamic, and this one definitely has this one. It also has like a little bit of like, not mystery, but like there's a little bit of like something else in this book. The synopsis makes it sound a little weird. I was almost like hesitant to start this book because of the last part of the synopsis that sort of makes it sound like something like really crazy is gonna go on, but there's nothing like too insane, I promise. So if you're hesitant, definitely check this one out. Next is The Roommate by Rosie Danan. This one, honestly, I heard about it and thought I would love it, and then I thought maybe I'm gonna hate it, and I finally just got it and read it. And it did take me a while to get into it. I think it was like 70 pages or something before there was like any real like progress, and I was like, okay, we're moving forward. But I did really like it in the end. I think the build up at the beginning could have been less, but other than that, I did really like it. Like I said, I'm currently reading the second one and it's going pretty good as well. But this one is about a girl who decides she's gonna move. I think she is not from this state at all. Like she decides she's gonna move far away to live with her, like, I guess teenage or childhood crush. And when she gets there, he's like, yeah, actually I'm like going on tour with my band, so I'm not gonna be here, but I like got you this random roommate off Craigslist. And she's like, what the heck, like I just like, you know, quit my job and like moved this to this city like just so she could be with this guy, and he has like no interest. He's like, yeah, I'm going with my band, like whatever, but he has no idea that she's only moved because she likes him. And so he's like, yeah, okay, like here's your roommate, okay, whatever, like you're good, bye. And he just like leaves. And at first she's like sort of chill with his roommate, like she's like, okay, we gotta have like ground rules and whatever, like this is gonna be this, this, and this. And then her friend, or it might be a relative, but it's someone, she's like at a restaurant with them and she mentions him, and they're like, don't you know who he is? And she's like, no, what are you talking about? And they're like, go home and Google him. And she does, and she finds out that he is basically an adult entertainer, is what they refer to it as in the book. And she's like kind of freaked out by that, but she doesn't want to like show it, so she's like in the living room like watching his videos when he like walks in, and he's like, what the heck are you doing? But it's like really funny, but it's also, in the end, I feel like it's good in other ways that I don't know, I can't say it without saying what happens in the book, but like they work together on something that I feel like is something that isn't really talked about a lot in books, maybe like a little bit more in romance books, but not so much in like general society. And so I thought that was like really cool how that sort of like ended. And so yeah, that one I really liked. Like I said, I just started the Intimacy Experience and it's been okay. I'm like halfway through. It was like really good up until like the 45% mark, and now I'm kind of like, okay, things are shifting, but like I'm hoping they're gonna get good again soon. So that one's going good as well. And the last one is A Lie for a Lie by Helena Hunting. I cannot believe I slept on this book for so long. If you love the Puck series, this is basically a continuation of the Puck series. Why they're not advertising it as that, I have no idea, because it like literally is. And I would have picked it up so much sooner if I had known that, because I love the Puck series, and I love those boys. And I need them back in my life, and now I have them back in my life. And this book is the best because it has got everything. It's got hockey boys, it's got Alaska, summer, all the vibes. It's like famous, but she doesn't know he's famous because he doesn't tell her that he's a famous hockey player. He tells her that he works on an alpaca farm, which apparently is where he grew up. But it's just, this book also, there's like something in it that I did not see coming, and normally it's something that I do see coming in books, so I was really surprised. This one was just so good, and there's like 3 more in the series that I'm sure are good. But like I said, if you liked Pucked, this is literally a continuation. I don't know why they made that like change, but whatever. Super, super love this one. Basically, this girl and guy, she like literally falls in his lap on the plane, and he thinks she's like throwing herself at him because another girl had done it previously on his earlier flight. And she's just like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, like I fell on you, whatever. And she goes back to like her like economy seat, you know, while he's in first class. And so he sort of thinks like, okay, I'll never see her again, like whatever. And then they end up on the same tiny little plane in Alaska going to this like small town, wherever they're going. And they end up talking because she's like freaking out on the plane, and she ends up like throwing up, which is like not cute, but she ends up like, he's like trying to comfort her and whatever, and he realizes that she has no idea who he is. And she like asks his name, and he gives him like, or he gives her the name that like his parents call him, but like the name that the public wouldn't know him by, so like if she looked him up, nothing would come up. And they basically are going to these 2 cabins. She's going to research for her thesis, and he is going to go fishing because his dad and his brother used to always go on this summer fishing trip, but now his dad has passed and his brother's wife is pregnant and having like complications, so he decided to stay behind. And so he decides he's going to go on this trip alone, and their cabins are like not super far from each other, and hers is like there's a rundown shack, and so he's like, you can't stay there, like come stay with me. And so they end up basically spending this whole summer together and like hooking up and whatever, and then they part ways, and they don't realize that they haven't left each other like really a solid way to contact each other, and so they just like never like are in contact again. And then it like jumps a year later where they kind of bump into each other, and that's when things get a little bit crazy. But this one is so, so good. Like I said, if you like Puck, you'll like this one. If you didn't like Puck, you'll still like this one. It's so good. So anyway, those are my current favorite new adult romances. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. I will see you in my next video.